Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Think and Reform podcast. My name is Luke Saint. Thanks for tuning in and thanks for listening. Please go to this podcast is brought to you by Future of Christendom. So please go to futureofchristendom.org to check out some events we have coming up. We have a conference coming up with Jeff Durbin and Eli Ayala. I think that's how you say his name. I think I've got his name right this time. It's called. I think I said his name correctly there. So please go to futureofchristendom.org, and I always have to look this up because I always forget the dates. It's October 9th through 11th in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. No other name: the supremacy of Christ amidst cults and counterfeit faiths. So we're very excited to put this on for everyone. Go there and register, and hopefully we'll see you guys in Lancaster, October 9th through 11th. For no other name. Very excited about that with Jeff Durbin and Eli Ayala. Oh man, I always struggle on his Ayala. I think is that I say his name. So a couple things to talk about today. I'm going to start off. Usually, I start off by ranting and raving about the Christian nationalists or whatever like that. Today, I'm going to start off, instead of cursing the darkness, I'm going to light a candle. And I'm going to play for you a podcast I listened to today by someone I met at one of our conferences a few months ago now. And the name of the podcast is Sola Lex Dei. And you can find it on Spotify. And the name of the guy who's making it is a guy named Gil Roten. And he and his friend Camden I met down at our conference a couple months ago, and really great guys. They're producing really great content, so go check out Sola Lex Dei podcast. I'm going to play a clip from his, and it's a very well-researched podcast. And he kind of says some things that I've been trying to say, though he probably says it better than I've been saying it. So I'm going to let him talk here, and he's going to give some context for the rest of this podcast. So this is from... Excuse me. This is from the podcast Sola Lex Dei, and the name of this episode is called "The Christian Prince Has No Clothes: A Theonomic Critique of Christian Nationalism."
Before I get into my critique, I want to answer why I believe this critique is necessary. Many people would claim that these debates are only infighting. My argument is that this is precisely why I need to respond to Christian nationalism. It is a prominent issue in my camp. There are significant differences in concern and emphasis on the fundamental issues in society and means of addressing them. That is not the main focus of this episode, although it cannot be absent entirely. The focus is on questions of the law, the nature of civil power, and the standard of Christian ethics. If the Christian nationalist program were a prominent movement within the Lutherans, for example, then I am not even sure I would have wanted to make an episode on it. It is precisely because it is gaining some prevalence over against theonomy within the Christian Reconstruction general stream, according to Reconstruction language and principles, and in fundamental opposition to theonomy, that it must be addressed. I do not seek to malign these men personally, but I must deal with their positions because of the genuine prevalence of their voice over and against the voice of the men from whom their inheritance and momentum were developed. I plan to establish two primary points. One, the Christian nationalism of Stephen Wolfe, Joel Webbon, Andrew Isker, and the Ogden Group has gained an inheritance and momentum from Christian Reconstruction. And two, these men are wasting their inheritance on a political program contrary to the Word of God, in that they have put aside Mosaic judicial law in favor of natural law theory.
Agreed. Yes. That's why we talk about Christian nationalism so much on this podcast. I agree with him 100%. What's happening is Christian nationalism is siphoning off all of the energy and the momentum of theonomy from Rushdoony, Gary North, and Bonson, and it's doing a 1-2 switcheroo, because I think a lot of people jumped onto the the Christian nationalist boat thinking that this was a more aggressive form of theonomy, right? A lot of the, looking at a lot of the theonomists from the 60s and 70s, they kind of look like stuffed shirts, You weren't going to really see Rush on the streets, right, debating people one-on-one. Rush wasn't going to have any sort of like hot takes, right? Gary North, looked like Mr. Peabody, right? And so I think a lot of young men were looking for somebody who, like the next generation. And I think these leaders kind of came in and they, I'm not going to ascribe any sort of like, snidely whiplash, mustache curling intentions. But I think what happened was they jumped in there with like the nod, like you're Reconstructionists, right? Yeah, we're Reconstructionists. And then they weren't done developing their theology, and now it turns out, well, actually, we're kind of not really. Reconstructionists, yeah, kind of, but it's kind of like too late, right? We're the biggest game in town if you want to have change in this country, and you want to basically sacrifice God's law and use your children as an excuse to do that. Like, I'm concerned about my child's future. God's law doesn't give us the tools we need to fight the immigrants. So let's, I'm going to hide behind my kids and say, well, I don't want my kids to grow up around brown people and blah, 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 blah. So let's throw God's law out the window and start deporting people. And so I think that's what's happening. And I think that's what's happened is I've seen it even with a lot of my friends who were theonomists are now calling themselves Christian nationalists, and they're not talking about God's law anymore, right? That's no longer the talking point. That was always a talking point of theonomy. It was about God's law. We need to establish God's law. What does God's law say about this? What does God's law say about that? It's center all of the discussions on what God's law has told for us. If you listen to this podcast, I really recommend you go listen to it. Very well researched, and he goes through and he talks about almost every leader, and he says, listen, they especially guys like Webben, they jumped on the boat saying I'm a theonomist. And they took all the theonomist followers, and then they're like, okay, I'm not a theonomist anymore. And unfortunately, their followers aren't theonomists anymore. That just seems to be what's happening. Is this next generation of theonomists came up, and everyone's like, yay, theonomy, and it's got muscles, and it's looking really sleek and sexy, and we're gonna jump onto this bandwagon. And turns out, they ripped off the label, and underneath the label is just nationalism. And the Christian part of that nationalism is fading fast. No one seems to be maintaining that part of the banner. But go check out the podcast. They're really great, very well researched podcasts, very informative, and it's very interesting to listen to some of the things that these guys have said. But I do believe the basic point is true, that Christian nationalism has taken the momentum of the theonomists and the reconstructionists of the 60s and 70s and 80s, and it has repurposed it towards nationalism. And now it's, like he said, the second point, he's like, it's being wasted. We're wasting it. We're wasting it because it just turns out, it's kind of like what's happening with Doug Wilson. Doug Wilson, for all of his talk about God's law and, his wordsmithing and all that kind of stuff, I'm concerned that it was all just like the culmination of all of his labor has been get our guy in office, and that appears to be Hegseth. And I have to ask myself, was this all that talking, all the hot takes, all the tweets, and the arguments and the debates, and obviously I still love Doug Wilson. I love almost everything he says. Whenever he speaks, I listen, but I just have to ask myself, was this what this was all about? I look at Hegseth in office. I'm like, was this the whole purpose? Because to get Hegseth in office, we had to abandon a lot of Christian principle, a lot of Christian law. We had to really shed a lot of our Christian testimony to get him in office and to keep him in office. Is that what this whole thing's been about? Just like that? Are we done now? Like, okay, mission accomplished. Everyone go home. We got our guy in office. They're not saying that, but man, that's what it feels like. That's really what it feels like. All the no quarter Novembers was to get Pete Hegseth in office. I hope that's not what this was all about. I hope this wasn't the end game. Pete Hegseth in office. I really hope this wasn't the end game. And I don't think Wilson or any of those guys would ever say, "Oh, yeah, that's what this was all about." But man, it's just kind of looking like that, right? It's really looking like that. That all this hard work, and we just abandoned so much of all that hard work, all that momentum, all that hope that we had for Doug Wilson fans. Like, we're gonna no quarter November this whole thing. If they're gonna ask us, do you want women in the military? We're gonna be like, no, like right in their face. Yes, amen, brother, preach it. And then those two feminists corner poor Hegseth in the interview, and he functions like your basic Republican politician. I'm like, what in the world? Are we just siphoning off all the energy of the Reconstructionists to get our guy in office? Is this where we're going with Christian nationalism? Just more of like the same route. My dad talks about this, the same route as the moral majority and the Christian coalition. Behind all the banners and the rah-rah and the confetti is this, same old tired, line of, we just need to get our guy in office. Is that what really is holding all this whole thing up? And that's why I believe Christian nationalism is a complete waste of time. That's the direction it's going. It's not going to. It's becoming a counter-reformation. That's what I think is going on. Christian nationalism is turning into a counter-reformation, and it's just going back to the same old tired arguments that created the theonomists in the first place. Like, we can't keep doing this get our guy in office crap. We can't keep going with the same old tired lines. We've got to go back to this thing called biblical faithfulness, where we've got to stop putting our faith in chariots. We got to start putting our faith in princes. And we've got to put our faith in the Lord. As unsexy and uncool as that looks, that's what we got to do. And boy, that was like the defining characteristic of theonomy back then. It was totally unsexy. It was totally uncool. I mean, a bunch of stuffed shirts just sitting around talking about God's law. Just so not cool, man. Loved every second of it, though. But this is turning into a counter-reformation, because I do believe that the Reconstructionists were gaining momentum, and now the Christian nationalists have come and they co-opted it, and now it's heading off in a different direction, back to the foundations that spawned the Reconstructionists in the first place. And Reconstructionists was a bid to get away from statism. We've got to get away of the idea of man as king. We've got to get away of statism. We got to get away from this idea that we can vote our way out of this. And boy, is that not Christian nationalism today. We can vote our way out of this if we get the right guy in office. If we just get rid of all the immigrants, if we just do something that's not God's law, whatever it is, as long as it's not God's law, that'll fix our problems. Because we can't do God's law right now. And you think I'm making this up? No, they are saying this. I've talked to them, Christian nationalist leaders, and they've told me to my face, we can't do God's law right now. We just can't. Can't do it. Sorry. God's law is just not the right idea for now. So I do agree with his claim there that they are co-opting the energy and they are wasting it, and they're going back. We're going back to Rome. It's like a Catholic. It's a Catholic op. The Christian nationalists. They love pointing a finger at something and calling it a conspiracy theory, or a Jewish op or whatever. But don't be surprised, CNs, when someone points a finger at you and says you're involved in a Catholic op. What do you think? Like, you're the only one who's allowed to see a conspiracy theory and call it a conspiracy theory? You guys are conspiracy theory now. All roads keep going back to Rome. You keep going back to Rome. Every single road. Your leaders are going back to Rome. Let's talk about the first thing here. First, I want to go to this group here. I want to go to this. picture my sister shared with me. She sent me a screenshot of somebody called Napoleon Bonaparte Approved or something like that, some sort of Twitter account. That's a Christian Nationalist Twitter account with all the same old Christian Nationalist talking points. Here's the phrase. Listen to this phrase. And I wouldn't share this if I didn't think that this was normative Christian nationalist rhetoric. But I think it is normative Christian nationalist rhetoric. I really do think that this is in the back of their minds. They think like this. I think this guy's just being honest. A girl, I don't know who it is. They're just being honest enough to say the uncool thing that everyone else is like, yeah, well, that's what we believe, but you're not really cool if you say it. And he says this. Mass deportation. This is July 11th, so just a couple weeks ago. Mass deportations, unironically, solve every single problem in society without fail and without exception. Did you hear that? What? Are you freaking kidding me? And you might hear this and go, oh, come on, that's ridiculous. But the Christian nationalists, this is what I think. They think this. I think that this is what they really believe when push comes to shove, that, yeah, all of our problems are going to go away. It's just easy problems, just maintenance after that. After we get rid of all the immigrants, it's just maintenance, baby. So my sister sends a message. She goes, abortion will cease to exist. And listen to this response. It might not solve that one, but certainly there would be compounding effects and it would substantially help. Now, let me just start. Let me go back to what he said initially. Mass deportations unironically solve every single problem in society without fail and without exception. My gosh. I mean, the Bible doesn't even make that claim, right? It doesn't even make that claim. Like, the Spirit of the Lord never says, hey, I'm going to come into your society and I'm going to solve every single problem in society without fail and without exception. The Holy Spirit never even makes that claim. What in the world? These guys are so anti-Christian. That is an anti-Christian thing to say. And so my sister says abortion will cease to exist. And he comes back and says, well, it says it might not solve that one. Right, because who cares about that one? I mean, who gives a flying you know what about that one? Right? That's not really a problem. They're not thinking about the real problems. And that's why I'm saying this is a counter-reformation. If reformation comes to this nation, the abolitionists are 10 times closer to bringing it around than the Christian nationalists are. The Christian nationalists appear to be standing in their way. From all intents and purposes, they're forming themselves to stand against the abolitionists because the abolitionists want God's justice now. They believe it can happen now. We want God's justice on this is one issue right here. Abortion. We want God's justice. That's what we want. And the Christian nationalists are kind of like, you silly people. Yeah, pat you on the head. Pat you on the head. You and your little abortion, anti-abortion ministries. You're so cute. We are going to walk around in togas and laurels and make a bunch of holes in the air with our fingers and talk about Aristotle and Plato and what is politics and what is an American and all this silliness. And you can go and try and honor the Lord, but we're the ones who are going to set ourselves up and become the elites. And they're starting to, it's so weird, but I'll show you later. They're starting to use that term now. The Christian nationalist leaders are publicly using the term elites. We need elites. That's what they're saying. We need elites. This is so anti-Christian. This is anti-Christian. Christianity never calls for elites. God's law never sets up elites. What are we going back to? The aristocracy now? Is that what we want? Is that our culture and heritage? That's my question to you, Christian nationalists. Elitism, is that our culture and heritage, or was it our culture and heritage a denial of that? They just make it up as they go, man. I can't believe you can possibly say mass deportations unironically solve every single problem in society without fail and without exception. How about abortion? Not that. Well, I mean, maybe not that one. I mean, come on. It's children dying, blood on our hands. The most innocent among us being slaughtered every single day. And wow, might not solve that one. You guys are so out of touch. Christian nationalists, you guys would be ashamed of yourself that you let this knucklehead walk around and say this idiotic stuff. But here's the thing. Most of you guys are saying this idiotic stuff. You really believe this? This is your talking point. This is your platform. This is like, oh, we got to get rid of the immigrants or else nothing's going to get done around here. A claim the Bible never makes. The Bible says, if you are unfaithful to me, I'm going to make the immigrant rule over you. And you're like, haha, we can get out of that one if we put up the right fence. We can be unfaithful to God and we can keep the immigrant out. The hubris. It's becoming a counter-reformation. It's just like, it's like the Jesuits like saw what the abolitionists were doing and were like, we got to stop this. These people are going to outlaw abortion soon. We got to kind of like start something in the other way. We got to start a fire burning in the opposite direction and hope it meets it and cancels it out. Insane that people are walking around saying this. People call themselves Christians. Just stop using the term Christian. I think a lot would make a lot more sense. Maybe I can leave you alone if you stop using the term Christian nationalist. Just stop using the term Christian nationalist. You're not acting like Christians. You forgot the most important thing about our culture and heritage, and that's the Bible. You forget about that. It's totally not a talking point for you guys. It's asinine to walk around and say things like, oh, you'll solve every single problem. Holy Spirit doesn't even say that. What in the world? So I want to play this clip to you from Safety Third. So this is the New Christendom press conference that they did a couple, I guess last month. And this is Eric Conn talking about recovering the American will to rule. And I just want to point this out and what he says here, and let's have a listen to what he says here in his presentation.
Number 2, leaders must be self-differentiated. Right, I'm borrowing a term, sounds weird to our ears, but again, from Ed Friedman. And what is a self-differentiated leader? Well, it's fundamentally somebody who is grounded in their principles and their identity and their vision and their goals. He says this, someone is self-differentiated who has clarity about his own life goals and therefore someone who is less likely to become lost in the anxious emotional process swirling about in any institution, right? You have to be so grounded in your principles. You're not a market trend guy. You're not riding the waves of whatever fad is happening at the time. You're grounded in principle. I'll give this example, during the Manosphere movement, which I started Hardman Podcast 2020, and during that movement, there were a lot of guys who said to me things like this. Wow, you just timed the market perfectly. How did you do that? Like, how did you know? And then 3 years later, the same guys were like, yeah, I'm getting out of that space. It's just not working anymore. Market share, whatever, it's eating up. And here's the crazy thing that I would tell them. I'm clueless about the market trend. I don't care. But here's what I was firm on. My principles, which came from older, wiser men like William Gouge and the Westminster Fathers, my principles were firm and they never changed. And that's why we still talk about sex piety today. Paul said, preach the word of God in season and out of season. One of the biggest problems that we have in so many of our movements are men who are trend wave riders.
I mean, if that doesn't describe Joel Webbon, I mean, can anyone honestly look me in the face and say, no, he's been the same the whole time? He's definitely like his starting mission, the same person he was 5 years ago is the same person he is now, and he's always been the same. His target has always been the same. Oh man, that would be a hard sell. I mean, we all know he's not going to be a Baptist in 3 years. Look, that is like, you can see it like a train coming down the tracks. Like, he is not going to be a Baptist. The baptism is hanging on by a thread, dog. It is not going to last much longer. The scissors of Anglicanism or Orthodox or, dare I say, Catholicism are coming for him. And he is not gonna be a Baptist 3 years from now. He's fundamentally changed his stance on a lot of things over the last couple of years. And here's Eric Conn saying we can't trust these men.
Right, I'll give a hypothetical. It's not about anybody in particular.
Is it?
But let's say last year, a man who espouses to be an expert in a space like this goes on a podcast and he talks about how much he loves them. Again, I'm not talking about anybody. He talks about how much he loves them. Right? He's all into it. And then a year later, he is positioning himself as the expert against that thing.
This Webben. He's now arguing against theonomy, telling us, why it's a bad idea. This is, the cracks in Christian nationalism. That's in my opinion, that's a crack. That's a crack right there. That's gonna become wider and wider. I just think that's a crack that's going to become wider and wider because Joel Webben is continuing to show himself to in my opinion, and maybe you know him better than me, but from what I've seen, he's kind of jumping around, right? And maybe you've been with him behind closed doors. Maybe you know the real him and all that kind of stuff. I don't know the real him. But man, he's jumping around. And man, this describes him. This describes Joel Webben. And you're a fool, I think, if you think Joel Webben's done transforming. The butterfly hasn't even come out yet. I think he's still like in a cocoon right now. And I think that Joel Webben from 10 years from now is going to be way different from the Joel Webben 10 years ago. I'm not saying you're not allowed to change stances and all that kind of stuff, but Eric Conn's kind of saying that, right? Like, you gotta be rock solid foundationally, and I don't think that describes Webben. He's very trendy. But perhaps, you could make the argument, well, his goal has always been the same. Perhaps. I don't know him, but man, I just think that he's heading to a place that's going to be fundamentally different from where he started. But according to Eric Conn, we shouldn't trust these men. Another thing I want to say, you look in the background, they got Washington. I think it's Washington crossing the Delaware there. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Washington crossing the Delaware. And, they're recovering the American will to... let me just play this here. It's American... Yes, safety third, recovering the American will to greatness. I don't think that's going to age well either. Because there's the three-way split in Christian nationalism coming, where the leaders are going to have to figure out, okay, where are we going with this? Because the way they're talking is we can't, because some of them are like, screw the Bible, tradition and heritage and culture. That's our goal, right? That's what even Wolfe said, like the Christian prince, he rules according to the tradition of the country he's in. He follows that tradition. So forget about the Bible, tradition. Okay, so where do we place the tradition boundary? Where do we place the tradition line? Where are we going with this? I said this before. I think a lot of the Christian nationalists are saying, well, we can't do it with America because America was born out of a break from that tradition, right? So we can't go back to the founding of America because America was born out of breaking the tradition of the Anglo-Saxon Protestants. And that was a monarchy, right? And we went with a republic, and that hasn't aged well because we're all gay now, and they're kind of like laying at the feet of the American Republic. And so okay, so there's some Christian nationalists that are like, okay, we can't do America. We got to go back to England. And so there's a lot of people becoming Anglicans now, because that's like, to them, ultimate heritage, right? I mean, England, right? That's where we came from, right? So we got to do that. We got to do Book of Common Prayer, blah, 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 blah. Got to go back to that, because that's where we split off from the tradition. So if we're going to be consistent in our tradition, we have to go back to England, and we got to go back to a monarchy. And then you got the ultra Christian nationalists, whom no one can stop. I mean, they are a all-consuming snowball that is going to flatten any sort of snowman that these guys try to put up in front of it. They're going, we got to go back to Germany, dog. That's where the real tradition and heritage comes from. Because how was Protestantism born? Well, it was the denial of the tradition of the church, right? Henry VIII. His reasoning was nothing that anyone alive can justify to leave the Catholic Church, right? People are going to say, well, he just did it just because he wanted to get married again. And that's where Protestant came from. And that's your culture and heritage? Oh, you got to be kidding me, blah, 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 right? So we got to go back to Catholic, and we got to go back to Germany, because where did the Anglo-Saxons come from? Well, they came from Germany. And all of the super edgy conversations right now are happening, swirling around Germany. And what does it mean to be German? And, was Adolf right? Was Adolf wrong? Was he a Christian prince? And that's where that's like the cutting edge of the based takes and super edgy tweets. And that's where it's all happening. It's all happening in Germany, baby. That's where it's going on. That's where the party's at. So the Christian nationalists, they're going to have a bad split. This is not going to age well, that these Ogden guys put a picture of Washington back there. That's not going to age well, because we're going to have to come actually out eventually and criticize the founding of America and say it was a bad idea and it was a denial of our culture and heritage and blah, blah, blah. We're going to have to do that as Christian nationalists, because culture and heritage is king, and we cannot be upholding people who killed their fathers and brothers in the name of breaking off that culture and heritage. That's not our culture and heritage. So this is not, in my opinion, this is not going to age well, that they picked the American will to greatness. I think they're going to be ratioed in a couple of years for that. It's not going to age well. Someone's going to make a hot take and be like, hot take, the America never had a will to greatness, and then we'll have a long thread and we'll have podcasts about it, and then we'll be super based and blah, 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 and we'll all join hands across the Twitterverse or the Xverse and say, yeah, starting America was a bad idea, and if you don't agree with me, you're not reformed, et cetera, et cetera. So I just want to point that out. What Eric Conn said, I agree with him 100% here. Our leaders have to be principled men. They can't be jumping from trend to trend like Joel Webben. The next one I want to talk about here is my favorite statist, Stephen Wolfe. Now, his presentation at the conference, same conference, he's got a picture of America behind him. Again, same picture, because it's the same podium. He's got Washington behind him, and now his presentation is home as a gift. Now, I think Stephen Wolfe is a good Christian philosopher. He has lots of wonderful things to say about Christian principles, Christian philosophy, Christian wisdom, right? He's got a lot of good things to say. Not like revelational things, but he's good at saying things that are pleasing to the ear that we all like to hear about Christian things. Like the home and a country and a people and a space and coming home and smelling beef, and there's mom in an apron and dad sitting on the easy chair with a pipe and and talking about that scene and going on for 20 minutes about that. He's really good at that. So let's just I just want to put context to his presentation here. I just don't want and I'm not going to let him get away with this. And you'll understand why I said that in a second here. So here's part of his presentation. I'm going to talk about two things from his presentation.
So home definition is a place of complacent delight generated by the activity of loved ones, which adorns space with intimate familiarity across generations in order to perfect the union of particular people and to foreshadow the union in the world to come. I'll say it again, and then I'll explain it. Home is a place of complacent delight generated by the activity of loved ones, which adorns space with intimate familiarity across generations in order to perfect the union of particular people and to foreshadow the union in the world to come. So I'm going to break this down and talk about it and explain myself a bit. Now, if you have some kids who are in classical schools and they're in the logic phase, they might look at that definition and be like, hey, that has the four causes in it, and it does. So good for them if they know that. But so we're going to work through those various causes there as painfully as I can make it. No, I'll try not to do that. So first of all, the form of it, I call it a place of complacent delight. I'll explain complacent in a moment, but let's talk about place. So place, I use the word place instead of space or site because place is some geographic space with additional human meaning to it. That's kind of how I understand place, as opposed to like just bare geographic space. So it's like my grandparents' house. Yeah, my grandparents' house is a house. There's some land there, a few trees, a driveway, but it's much more than that. It's not just a space of material, it's a place, and it's a place for me in my experience.
Okay, just remember that. Okay, he's not wrong. I agree with everything he said there. And, in this presentation, it's a really good presentation about, the home. But I just want to point this out to you. What he said there, it's not just a space, or it's not just, it's a place, for me and my experience. And I keep getting this impression from Stephen Wolfe that he really cares a lot about his stuff, but he doesn't really care about your stuff that much. And I'm going to go back to the defense of common good, which he just did 2 months ago. And let's listen to what he says. Now, that's what he's saying about his house. Now, let's see what he has to say about your house.
Or any sort of negative externalities that would arise from it. So there you go. And what is that? Again, we're thinking of the good of the community, the good of others around you. It's not simply your property. Your property itself should be oriented to the common good. And in limited ways, the government has a role to do that for the good of everyone else. The other one is, and this is the last thing before I'm done, is land use. So this is very similar. But where I live out in the country. As I said, it's a beautiful country landscape. What happens, though, is we have people who live in places called Morrisville and Raleigh, which is to our east about 45 minutes to an hour. They have names you probably can't pronounce, similar to Ramaswamy. And they pool together all their money because they tend to be doctors and dentists and stuff. And they pool millions of dollars together in these LLCs. And then they go out and they buy huge chunks of property so they can build houses. They don't care about American landscape. All they care about is getting millions and millions of dollars in selling homes. They don't care about the look of homes. They don't care about the quality of homes. They don't care about the density of the homes. They just care about making millions of dollars by selling it. But they don't live here. They don't live around here. In fact, they might have traveled here once, and they traveled here once maybe to see the land. Because it could be that they just talked to a realtor who said it was good and they trust him, and so they bought it. They are doing that all around me, where I live. And so we have formed this little group, and this little group is trying to advocate for the county to do some restricted building. We are not opposed to building. We're not opposed to growth, but the growth ought to be appropriate. The growth ought to be such that it preserves the traditional landscape that we live in, because we live here, we like it. We do think people should be able to build homes, that there should be development, but it should be 3 to 5 acre lots. And that means that you have spread out homes. It doesn't destroy the landscape. It maintains, in that sort of thing, it maintains all the trees. We have beautiful hardwood trees out here. For some reason...
Listen, Christian Nationalism, this is your guy? This is your guy? I mean, I said this before when I played this clip before on this podcast, but this Karen nationalist who's concerned that people are building homes and they're not 3 to 5 acres. Are you freaking kidding me? This is the problem with America right now. Here's what we need to. I mean, he pats everyone on the head. This is what Christian nationalists do. They pat you on the head for your little abortion ministry, but we're going to do the important work of getting involved in a local community thing and then force people, when they build homes, to have just 3 to 5 acres. That's how we get politically involved. Now, you're trying to end abortion. You're cute. Isn't that nice? Here's a cookie. Go play in the corner. We're going to do the important work of making sure that when you buy a house around here, it's 3 to 5 acres. This is your guy? This is the guy who's going to bring about reformation to this country? This is his battle that the dust settles, the smoke clears. You get involved in anti-abortion ministry and he gets involved in his local HOA board. This is your guy who's leading Christian nationalism. When the dust settles and he's politically active, he's trying to stop people from making homes. And he gives this presentation back here about how great your home is. And here he is trying to stop people from making them. Note that it's the people with last names you can't pronounce. They're not even living in these homes. They're just making homes for other people to live in. Maybe your own white brother countrymen. Maybe they're buying homes too, starter homes. But no, when push comes to shove, he wants to swoop in and be like, no, you can't do that. How can you talk about how great homes are and then be politically active against them? How can you do that? How does that make sense? Like I said, I think he loves his stuff, but I don't think he gives a flying frick about your stuff. No, you can't have that home. No, I'm going to get involved with legislation stopping you from living here. Why? Because you don't have 3 to 5 acres, so it sucks to be you. If you want to live around here, you got to have 3 to 5 acres. You jerk. Well, can't I have a starter home? No, you can't. You got to have 3 to 5 acres if you want to live around here. But didn't you just give this great big talk about how great homes are? Yeah, I know I did. But that's for me. That's not for you. Because I can't pronounce your last name. So it sucks to be you. Guys, is this your guy? Is this your boy? I think Stephen Wolfe's a really nice guy. But a Christian leader, he is not. This is not Christianity. This is just silly nationalism. This is just silly, Greek talking points. This is silliness. How can someone talk about home as a gift and then advocate against it politically at the same time? How much sense does that make? This is your leader? This is what he thinks the problem is when he gets politically involved is to stop people from making houses? Oh, please. Guys, you gotta be ashamed of yourselves that you're following this guy. Look, he's a nice guy. He's got a lot of good things to say. But for Pete's sakes, we have something more important called the scriptures, which shed light on these matters. And it says in Matthew 5, whoever relaxes the least of these and tells others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom. And you guys are like, we're going to find the person who's barely Christian and relaxes almost every single commandment you can find in the Bible. And we're going to put him up as our leader. And we're going to call ourselves based for doing it. Don't tell me he's not relaxing the scriptures. He is. He absolutely is. He didn't even know half of them. You ask him about Deuteronomy, dude is clueless. He's all classicaled up. He's all Romanized up. He knows his reformers, but he doesn't know Leviticus. And this is your leader. God, what an embarrassment. As a Christian testimony, what an embarrassment of a movement this is. It's just embarrassing. I'm ashamed that the term Christian is applied to this. Now, the Christian nationalists are always going to be right because in this sense that they're always going to be correct whenever they're militant about we want a Christian nation. They're always going to be right about that. But my goodness, it's just devolving so fast. And the dust is settling, and boy, that Christian aspect is fading fast. Because your leader, who won't be bothered to go out on the streets and get out of his ivory tower, as far as I know, who doesn't celebrate that, he's going to sit in his nice home with surrounded by all his hardwoods, and he's going to get politically involved. And no, politically involved doesn't mean he's advocating for the unborn. Politically involved to him means I'm going to stop these people from trying to buy tracts of houses to put homes. Oh, but I love homes, and home is more than just a space. It's a place. It's a really great place. I'm going to rewind that just that clip there for you, so you can remember that this is the guy who wants the state to enforce zoning laws so that if you don't put the right rhododendrons on your front porch, you get kicked out of your house.
Through those various causes there, as painfully as I can make it. No, I'll try not to do that. So first of all, the form of it, I call it a place of complacent delight. I'll explain complacent in a moment, but let's talk about place. So place, I use the word place instead of space or site because place is some geographic space with additional human meaning to it. That's kind of how I understand place, as opposed to like just bare geographic space. So it's like my grandparents' house. Yeah, my grandparents' house is a house. There's some land there, a few trees, a driveway, but it's much more than that. It's not just a space of material, it's a place. And it's a place for me in my experience.
But it doesn't have 3 to 5 acres now, does it? So, What's more important than your home, you plebeian, kicking and gouging in the mud and the blood and the beer? What's more important than your home is the American landscape. And if you want to have a home at expense of the American landscape, I'm going to get politically involved so that you can't. I'm going to advocate to outlaw you doing that. That's for the cities where the ugly people live and all that kind of silliness. That's for them. But out here in the country where the nice people live, I'm gonna advocate politically against you so that you can't come out here and live amongst all of my hardwoods. This is asinine. This is completely asinine. And this is the leader of Christian nationalism? This is the guy you guys prop up? That's embarrassing. You ought to be embarrassed. This is not a Christian talking point. This is not a biblical talking point. He's not lifting up the scriptures. He's not saying to the law and the testimonies. Did you know that the Bible said that? Do you care? And don't call yourself a Christian if you don't know. To be a Christian is to follow the teachings of Christ. Christ said, whoever relaxes the least of these commandments and tells others to do the same, that's Stephen Wolfe, will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. And you're like, that's our leader. And you guys want to be based in the kingdom and all that kind of stuff. You guys don't give a... Man, I want to use harsh language here. You guys do not care about the kingdom if this is your guy. You guys care about bootlicking statism, getting all the immigrants out, increasing the police state at expense to our freedom and expense to our liberty. You know, the thing that the thing that Washington and all those guys on that boat, you know, in that really random Delaware River near New Jersey, you know, the thing that they sacrificed so much to give us, and now we're like, let's all give it away. Let's give away more of it. Let's go against Washington and the hard work of those guys, so that we can give the state more power to police us. It's insane. Let's go over here to the end of his presentation here.
Him to see what his home had become in his absence. But did he devise a theology or a philosophy to tolerate it? Or do you...
He's talking about Samwise Gamgee here and the end of The Lord of the Rings, the scouring of the Shire.
Even glory in its desecration? Did he throw up his hands and say, well, this is divine judgment, we have to just take it? No, he acted. With his friends Merry and Pippin, he fought and won in the Battle of Bywater. And afterwards, they replanted and healed the land, and Sam became the mayor of Shire. In our day, our homeland, gifted to us in liberty from our ancestors, lies in ruin. The party of Saruman, with their reckless hate, have spoiled and polluted it. But we can put safety third.
Now remember, the spoiled and polluting means making houses that are less than 3 to 5 acres. That's his definition.
And fight back. The foreigners flying their foreign flags must go back. All illegal immigrants must go back. All H-1B.
That's not a biblical talking point. Bible doesn't recommend deportation. Bible recommends indentured servitude restitution, death, or public flogging, with a couple more exceptions. But it's not like, hey, if someone's here is causing trouble, pick them up and place them on the other side of the border. That'll teach them. That's not a biblical talking point.
These must go back. Send them all home, where their hearts will always reside anyway. Third world immigration must cease immediately. Dual citizenship must be...
Third world immigration will cease immediately. Third world. So, I mean, they talk about the immigrants, but they don't really mean... I'm convinced they don't really care if, let's say, 30,000 people from Poland came over here. I don't think they really care about that. You know, if suddenly they're looking around and all of these immigrants from Ireland show up, I don't think they care. It's European, basically like me or whatever. I don't think they care that much. I just think they're talking about brown people, really. I'm not really sure what their stance is on Asians.
Banned, as well as birthright citizenship, an absurd policy. Businesses who hire foreigners must be punished or shut down. Pornography.
See, now we're just inhaling the statism. Yes, people who hire foreigners must be punished. I want the state getting involved in hiring foreign. If you hire an illegal immigrant, you must be punished. No, it's just like, what is Christian about this? Can anyone name me anything Christian about this at all? You know? Just get the Jesus Juke crap out of your mind, okay? Stop. What is Christian about what he just said? Is that honoring to the Lord that we're coming into people's businesses, punishing them because you didn't hire somebody that I allowed into the country? Is that a Christian talking point?
Abortion, gay marriage must be eradicated, and there's hope for this as the new right makes their ascendance. As I said earlier, home simply happens. Without thinking much about it, in our time of rapid change, hostility, demographic change, home requires conscious effort. That is, we must move to a more authentic mode of being in which home is made by conscious effort. This, in a way, is unnatural. It shouldn't be this way. The preferable situations where home just happens. But we will lose.
Unless, home should just happen. Unless Dr. Wolfe gets his way and you can't make a home near him, that's less than 3 to 5 acres. You know, you shouldn't be struggling, but you should.
Our home without it. Our time calls for it. We need the mundane and the ordinary, but more than that, we also need the extraordinary. It is not enough to deport or to tear down the smut. We must replant, replenish, and renew. And this takes both mechanical and literary arts. We must, through mutual support, seek excellence in all areas of life. We need poets, novelists, essayists, musicians, academics, architects, lawyers, and statesmen.
You know, it's not necessarily wrong what he's saying here, but my goodness, is this what God, is this a message from God in his word? Can you read the Bible and look at the destruction of our nation and conclude it's because we don't have what he's asking for here? This is not Christian. This is not Christian heritage. This is statism. This is calling to create more of the problem that got us here in the first place. This is not Christian. To be like, oh, we need statesmen. That's what we need. Brother, we got all the statesmen in the world. Even Christian statesmen. Problem's not going away, dog.
We even need wealthy patrons to fund the long-term pursuit of excellence in various institutions. It's important, we need some people to be loud and others to quietly build. Not everyone has to be loud. Some people can just be quiet and build. So another thing, we Protestants must realize that there is more to politics than opposing abortion.
There's more to politics than opposing abortion. There's more to politics than opposing abortion. It's like I said, this is like a counter-reformation. They're like getting in the way of the abolitionists. It's like they're like this close to actually coming out and be like, you guys need to stop. Like this close. to being like, hey, you guys need to knock it off. You're making us look bad. We don't need sidewalk people. We need statesmen and lawyers and accountants and elites. That's what we need. We need some people. We need those people to be loud, not you. You guys are making us look bad. You're not sexy. You're not cool. And you're calling for biblical law. We can't do that right now. So, you guys gotta knock it off. You're this close to saying it. Like I said, this is like looking more and more like a counter-reformation.
Posting videos of yourself opposing abortion. I know that this energizes the base and the evangelical voting bloc, but there's a reason why, even in the conservative movement, that Roman Catholics dominate the institutions. Why is there no evangelical in the Supreme Court? Why is nearly every well-known conservative institution dominated by Roman Catholics?
I believe I'll finish here.
There are many reasons. I can go on and give a whole speech about that. But one reason is that Protestant politics has been reduced largely to populist appeal. We lack elites because everything is populism.
I think this is, again, sometimes for someone who knows so much about politics, I think he's incredibly naive on some things, and I say that with respect to him. It's a big thing to say for someone like Dr. Wolfe, but why you look at this godless, institution of the state, and you wonder why there's no Protestants in there. It's like asking, why aren't there any Protestants working at Planned Parenthood? Why aren't there many Protestant public school teachers? Right? It's like looking at the Methodist Church and going, like, why aren't there any true believers in there? Because the institution does not reward godliness and faithfulness, and the Protestants have a very high premium on living their faith in all areas of life. When they go into an institution, they want to live out their faith in that institution. But if that institution hates them and hates God, then they will not succeed in that endeavor. They will be kicked out. Faithfulness to Christ is not rewarded in the institutions that he just mentioned. Why is there no Protestants in the Supreme Court? Because American politics punishes Protestantism. That's how it is now. You go out there and you say what you believe. I believe Christ is king. You will be kicked out. You will not be rewarded. You run on a Christian platform. If you say in front of an inquiry that I believe that women should not be in the military, that is a Christian talking point, you will not succeed. And that's why the Christian Nationalists had to tell Pete Hegseth, well, you got to pivot, you got to maneuver, you got to compromise. Look at that. We finally got a Protestant in here, but he had to compromise on several key issues in order to get there. Look at the Pete Hegseth interview. And you wonder why there's no Protestants in there? Because if a Protestant was going to be honest and say everything that he believes, he would never get into office. They wouldn't let him. There's things in these institutions called gatekeepers, making sure that godly and righteous people don't make it in. And the only way to get in is if you bow the knee and kiss the ring to the statist pedophiles. And you wonder, why don't we have any Protestants? Because you can't be a Protestant and function in these spaces at the same time. You will get kicked out. Someone close to me has already been fired from 2 corporate jobs because of his public faith and testimony. And he wouldn't hide it. He's not going to hide it. But he's lost his job twice because of his public faith. Twice. And it wasn't even that grandiose. One, he was just handing out tracts at work, and someone spotted him doing it. Or he set him down, someone saw it and got offended. Okay, see ya. Lost that job. And the other one was he wasn't even at work. He was out doing public ministry, and someone posted a picture, and then they told on him and said, "Oh, I can't believe you guys support this guy." And they doxed him basically, and they canceled him. Lost his job. He wasn't even in the institution. And you're sitting around wondering, why don't we have any godly and faithful people? Maybe because that institution doesn't want godly and faithful people. Maybe because that office is not made for godly and faithful people. Maybe because godly and faithful people look at that office and say, I would never want to do that. Tell people how to live and order their lives for them. Because I love the freedom, I want to love my neighbor as myself, I don't want people telling me how to live, so I'm not going to tell them how to live. And that looks like it's completely unattractive to me as a Protestant. As a faithful Christian, that office looks disgusting to me. It's like, why aren't there any Christian dungeon masters? Why are all the dungeon masters pagan? We need to get Christian dungeon masters. Why isn't the IRS completely filled up with Christians? We need to get Christians in the IRS. Why are there no Protestant leaders in the IRS? Maybe because the station is odious to us as Protestants. Maybe because we hate that station. And if we were to go in there, we would reform it. And they don't want that. Maybe because, part of Catholicism is this wishy-washy Christianity. You basically function like the same as Judaism. Like you give it a nod, yeah, but I'm not really one. It's okay. I'm gonna be a bootlicker just like everybody else.
Even those with fancy degrees orient themselves to the many, but we need something more. We need elite formation.
This is not a Christian talking point. The early church, the Old Testament, talking about Moses, he was an elite, but he denied that. He denied that. By faith, Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. Why aren't there any Christians in Pharaoh's court? Moses, what could he really use you? My dog? What are you doing? You're running away to Midian? And now you're being mistreated just like the rest of us. We had you in court. Moses, you were there. Moses, what are you doing? You wasted that opportunity. You were an elite. Look at all the good you could have done. You could have passed a law that benefited older Egyptians. You could have passed a city ordinance that no loud noise after 10 o'clock. Look at all the good you could have done, Moses, and you instead choose rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin as an elite. What are you doing, Moses? My goodness. Let me give you a Christian talking point here. In Luke chapter 22, verses 24 through 27. This is our Christian heritage. We want a political system that rewards people like this, that exalts people who do this. Right now, we have a political system that punishes people who act like Christians. If you act like a Christian in our political system, you will be punished. You'll be sued if you act like a Christian in our political system. You won't get into office. You'll be punished. And so we don't want a political system that punishes us for acting like Christians. We want a political system that rewards us for acting like Christians. Luke chapter 22, right? I'm 22. Yeah. A dispute also arose among them as to which of them was to be regarded as the greatest. And he said to them, the kings of the Gentiles. This is a political statement. The kings. We're talking about politics now. This is not just Christian living for your little Bible study out among your hardwoods. This is a political discussion. The kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and those in authority over them are called benefactors. But not so with you. Rather, let the greatest among you become as the youngest, and the leader as the one who serves. For who is greater, the one who reclines at table or one who serves? Is it not the one who reclines at table? But I am among you as the one who serves. Our leaders, we should have a political system where our leaders are doing that, right? I'm not saying you can't rule. Obviously, Christ was still ruling while he was doing this. He was still their leader. But we should have a political system that rewards people who do this, who act like Christ. Act like Christ in this way. If you act like Christ in any way in our political system, you will be outed. You will be punished. You'll be fired. You'll be sued. They'll pass new legislation to make sure you can never get back in. And here's Dr. Wolfe saying, no, we need to reject this idea, this Christian heritage idea. This is our Christian heritage. Sorry to break it to you, but this is the Bible's filled with our Christian heritage. That's our true Christian heritage. Here's this idea that the greatest among us must be the least, and we must celebrate that idea. We must institute that idea into our political thinking. He's going, no, we need to do the opposite. We need to get some really great people and put them into power. That's not Christian.
The sort of people who can take seriously the complexity and challenges of political life and all its various aspects. We do need the soundbite maker, Joel. We do need the soundbite maker. And we need the guy who owns the abortionist and the atheist on YouTube. I'm not saying don't do that, but we need more than that. We also need those, however, who will stick to the principles, their principles, and know the institutions, the laws, the disciplines, and the procedures of government. We need an intellectual class.
This is not Christian thinking. This is not exegeted from the Bible about who we should have ruling over us and who the greatest among us should be and all that kind of stuff. This is 21st century American political philosophy with some Greek and Roman ideas thrown in. This is not Christian. It's not.
I know this is really about home, but I wanted to say this. Further, we need an intellectual ethos that allows one to take seriously the Western tradition beyond the theological innovations after World War II. And more importantly, an ethos that supports each other to see that fellow Protestants retake ownership of our Protestant country. That should be our public identity. Protestants renewing a Protestant country.
Who were the people who got rid of the requirements for office that, like, you had to be a Protestant, you had to be a Christian, you had to acknowledge Christ? Who were those people? Was it not the Protestants who did that? How in the world could you get rid of the requirements for these Christian, very, very biblical and very Christian requirements to take office? How did they get rid of them? Are you going to say, no, the immigrants got rid of them? Or the people who are not Protestants got rid of these requirements? The problem wasn't that we didn't have Protestants in power. The problem was we were not faithful to God's law. And we instituted a system that was going to eventually punish people who started acting like Christians. And that's what we have today. The problem isn't that we don't have elites. That's not the problem. The problem is that our Christian elites are punished in our political system if they were to ever get in.
So we hear a lot about envy today. True, there's a fine line between envy and righteous anger. I think there's a lot more indignation, righteous indignation, on our side than envy. But regardless of whatever motivates these things, let's channel it to something else. That is emulation. Emulation. You can be indignant, you can be righteous in it, but if you're just tweeting about it, it's not going to work. You need to emulate. Emulate the successful. Find those people who have achieved something great. Study them. Follow their example. Your energy should be directed to improving yourself through emulation, not denouncing injustice. We should practice the good, emulate the wise and successful. Emulate even our enemies. not to their evil ends, not in their evil means, but in those good and morally indifferent qualities that brought them their success. All right, I'm going to end on this. Lastly, I want to speak to families. The love of homeland begins at home. So I'm going to...
The state approved home. He does believe in zoning laws. Only if the state approves. Just throwing that in there.
I'm going to quote a passage from Johann Herder. I'm not going to do it in a German accent because that would be awkward, but this is Johann Herder, died in 1801, so calm down.
That's actually really funny.
All right, what first invigorates us, this is Herder, what first invigorates us in the fatherland is not the earth beneath our feet, but the air we breathe, the father's hands that hold us, the mother's breast that feeds us, the sun we see, the siblings we play with, and the friendly natures that are good for us. Our first fatherland, therefore, is the father's house, a father's field, family. It is in this small society that the first and foremost friends of the fatherland live, as in an idyllic circle. The land of our early youth lives just by such ideals. Yet the soil, let the soil or climate be what it may, the soul yearns to return there. It was there that we heard and understood the first tones of love. It was there that we committed ourselves to friendship for the first time and felt the first buds of tender attraction between the sexes. We saw the sun, the moon, the sky, the spring with its trees, blossoms, and fruit that were then so sweet to us. The course of all the world was displayed for us. We saw the seasons roll along. We struggled with dangers, with grief and joy. We grew into the world like summer and winter, as it were. These impressions, moral and physical, remain engraved upon our imagination. The tree's tender bark receive them, and if they are not eradicated by force, they will die only with the tree itself. All right, so we've all heard that citizenship begins at home, but let me conclude here by saying that the love of homeland begins at home. This is where our children learn folk stories, the lives of great men, the symbols and the great events of our people. It's where they learn the birds, the trees, the labors of keeping home, the sacrifices for those dear to us, and the practices and sentiment of patriotism. And it's where they first learn to praise God for the wonderful gift of home. Let us remember that great calling from God and from our ancestors, that we would pass down a home for our children and for our grandchildren. Thank you.
I mean, again, this is coming from a guy who believes in zoning laws, that if you violate the government's arbitrary standards for creating a home, you should lose that home. Because if you don't pay the fine, you'll be evicted. Whatever fine they give you, they now have the right, if you don't pay it, they have the right to evict you. That your township does. Or you'll be arrested. Remember, I mean, this is all well and good. But you've got to remember that people who deny God's law as the standard of justice and righteousness in the land, who are like, we can get to justice and righteousness and peace and order without God's law. We don't need God's law. We can just kind of get the elites together and we can figure it out while the plebeians, suck on their thumbs in the mud. When you deny God's law, as Dr. Wolfe does time and again, he's like, we don't really need to talk about that. I mean, most of this here was could have been delivered by a Catholic or, wishy-washy Lutheran or a Methodist. I mean, very little about is biblical. It's incidental that whatever it is biblically correct. He very rarely quotes the Bible. He rather quotes somebody else. But it's mostly nationalism. It's American nationalism that with a little bit of American's history is Protestant, so it's incidentally Protestant. But when you put this guy as the leader of your nation, the Bible says those who serve them become like them. You're going to become like him. You're going to poo-poo the abolitionists and the people really trying to establish justice in the land who cry out, as in the book of Ezekiel, about the injustices going on. and you're going to poo-poo them, and you're like, no, actually, you know, we need to get our togas on and our laurels, and we need to stand around and talk about, you know, what kind of houses are allowed to be put in here, and should they have 3 to 5 acres, and you know, I'm going to get philosophical about my home, but you're not even allowed to have a home because city ordinance. So sucks to be you. But this is your leader. And this is what the Christian nationalists are becoming like. They're becoming like these bootlicking statists who want to increase the police state and want to control every aspect of our lives in the name of getting rid of the brown people or the people from the third world. That's completely ridiculous. It's not Christian. Just stop calling it Christian nationalism, please. It's an embarrassment to the heritage and tradition of Christianity. It is complete embarrassment. I mean, you guys ought to be ashamed of yourselves that you're propping this guy up as a leader. I get it, maybe as an influencer, but not as a leader. This guy can't be leading our thoughts. I mean, he's Pied Piping. All of you guys right out of Reformation and into counter-reformation. You don't even realize it. It's a disgrace. It's just such an embarrassment. This is that the term Christian is even applied to this movement, and it is a movement, but it just appears to me to be a counter-reformation. Well, that's all I have for today. The next week, I will be traveling to Africa. I'll see my dad there, and I'll see Christian missionary Charles van Veek and several other men out there. We're going to minister in the Congo and help those guys out there think biblically about Christian political science. So hopefully it goes well. I appreciate your prayers for all of us as we do that. Just hope we have success, and hopefully I can share some stories when I get back. And had a decent time last time I went, and thankful for people who pray for us and people who support us financially in that endeavor. And thankful for my church for helping us out with that. So we'll see you guys next time. And thanks for listening to this episode of the Think and Reform podcast. And remember, my friends, think and reform.